If you've ever tried to quit weed before and failed, at what moment did you fail? And this came at me in a question from a guy called Kevin, and his basic question is, every time I sit down to play Xbox, I will have a very strong feeling to smoke. How can I overcome the feeling to smoke weed when I play Xbox? These are triggers. So what we cover in this is two different types of triggers that you get, two parts of your brain that control triggers, and at the end of the video I'll give you a 4-step strategy to overcome triggers. So let's talk about the two different types, pattern-based and there's emotion-based. So before I start, I want to clarify, it's always to do with emotion, always. But sometimes the trigger is based on a pattern and sometimes the trigger is based on the emotion itself. Pattern-based triggers, a thing, event, person or place or time or anything that reminds you subconsciously to go and smoke weed. And they come down to pattern searching and just reacting without controlling it. So what do I mean? Oh, let me tell you some of my triggers that I had. I was a drug dealer, as you all know. So I'd go to a lot of clients' places and it was just a trigger for me. As soon as I'd see that person's face, their face reminded me of weed. Another trigger I had, which some of you may have, a lot of you won't have, but some of you may have, was waking up. Seriously, waking up was a trigger for me. It was a morning routine. It was a pattern. Oh, I'm awake now. Where's the weed? That's a pretty bad one. But there's plenty of them. When you've just finished dinner and you're full, your gut's full, and you feel content, some people use that as a trigger to smoke weed. So they're pattern-based triggers. So what are the emotional triggers? These are a bit different. This is a state of mind or an emotional state that puts you in a frequency that reminds you subconsciously to go and smoke weed. So let's say someone gets pulled over in their car and the police pulls them over. A lot of people have a cigarette. They're trying to calm their nerves. They believe cigarettes help them relax and that's what they're trying to do. So I want you to picture this. Imagine this couple and let's say one day they disagree and they do not come to a resolution. And this is an emotionally involved argument. They're both heated, right? And then suddenly the woman can't take enough and she walks outside and has a cigarette. He sits down and chops up some weed. This happens all day long and people don't even notice. So they are your triggers, either something pattern-based and there's emotion-based. All stupid belief systems. So let's look at your brain. There's the prefrontal cortex. We've talked about that before as Albert. And there's Rex, which is your amygdala. So what's the prefrontal cortex? Tons of animals have this, tons of animals don't have this. So some of the obvious smartest animals are monkeys, right? Chimpanzees, where we came from. But other animals have this too, like elephants and dolphins. And the thing with animals that bother to evolve this section of their brain, one thing they have is self-awareness, which means they can have self-control. And what Albert does is watches Rex and he starts to recognize what's working. He starts looking for patterns and he starts to fix it. And when he gets good at watching on Rex, that's called emotional intelligence. But this amygdala has problems, and if it does get problems, it stops sending the messages to Albert because it's damaged. The amygdala appears to play a role in binge drinking, smoking weed, and when it's being repeatedly damaged by abuse and then recovery, withdrawals, all of that, that signal is dampened. It's not as strong. So Albert can't read it, Albert can't learn, and you can't develop emotional intelligence. So that's what's going on. What's the 4 steps to control triggers? First, recognize the pattern. So some event, thing or person or place or anything is triggering an emotion that makes you take action to numb that feeling before you even feel it consciously. That's what happens. If you're smoking weed day to day to day and there's no logical reason and you've been doing it for years and you've tried to quit and you've failed, this is the reason. Second step, feel the emotion and name the emotion. What is Albert calling the signal that Rex is sending? We have in our vocabularies, most of us, hundreds of words to describe mostly negative emotions that we feel. So give your emotion a name. What is it? Guilt? Is it fear? Boredom? anxiety, loneliness, angst, vexed, furious, angry, scared, frustrated. Call it an emotion. Third step, discover the hidden wisdom. You just have to sit down and be with it. Be with it. Don't numb it out. We're used to seeing how we feel. We know if we're stoned or not. But there's also a lot of things we're not aware of consciously that's still going on and we're very aware of subconsciously. To the point where you take action. You actually get up, you go get your weed, you chop it up and you smoke it just to get rid of that thing, whatever it is. So next time you notice yourself doing this, just sit down and be with the feeling. This isn't meditation, this is just being with it. Trying to stay present rather than escape the present. And then pretty quickly you're going to want to get up and go and get weed, right? Because you've had your trigger. So when that feeling comes, instead of acting on it, just observe it and be with it. And you don't have to do it for long, just commit to 5 minutes. This is going to give you self-control. As you process emotions, this is what develops your vision of the world. And we're all different. We have different chemicals in us, different goals, different results, different skills, different motivations. So no one can tell you. You've got to figure it out for yourself. And if you're not getting these messages, you're not getting the wisdom, you're not developing emotional intelligence, and you may not be growing as much as you should be. And the fourth step is to reprogram or rename the feeling that you get. So after you've sat with it for 5 minutes, you might notice that the craving disappears. Cravings don't last 5 minutes, they're much shorter than that. And by the time you get to that stage, you may as well commit to another 5 or go back to what you were doing. Because the more times you do that thing that used to give you the trigger, without actually giving in to the weed temptation, the more you are reprogramming that feeling to the point where you will call it something else. It might be something a lot less mild or nothing at all, which means the trigger's gone. And by the way, this works in reverse. The words you use are so important. Instead of saying you hate something, if you just say something annoys you, it might not trigger the same feelings. Words are very powerful. It all sounds woo, doesn't it? I promise you, it sounds woo. If I told me this stuff 10 years ago, I would have said, who invited this guy? But what I'm telling you is the truth, I promise you. So try this stuff, it works, I hope it helps, and I'll talk to you again soon. Did you have any triggers that made you go smoke weed? Any things, events, people, places, times of day? Anything that reminded you subconsciously to smoke weed? I'd love to hear what it was. Please like this video if it helped you in any way. Please share this video if you know anyone that it could help. My name is Seb Graham. Please click below for way more, and I'll talk to you again soon.